Good morning and good afternoon to many of you. Welcome in the Urban Dialogue, the fifth one in the series. And this dialogue is coming to you from Monterrey, Mexico. My name is Rob Rogema. I'm a professor of regenerative culture at Tecnológico de Monterrey. And today we will have a very interesting chat and talk about heat in the city. And I remember when I was young, our summers, it was really strange when it was 30 degrees. And everyone was very excited. Oh, it's 30 degrees, we passed the 30-degree mark. But nowadays, there is nothing strange anymore. So in the same city, 30 degrees, I was living in the Netherlands. It is not a coincidence anymore. It's nothing strange. So many cities around the world are actually facing much higher temperatures, like 40 or 45 degrees in summer. And the question is, did we ever change our practice in urban planning and urban design to adapt to these changes? Or are we just doing the same thing all the time and think we need to cope with the heat and don't change anything in the city? Recently, I think there has been a very interesting research done in Europe in almost 300 cities. And they found that in those cities, green cover can lower the land temperature by 12 degrees. So it's very interesting research going on. It's not impossible to do something about it. So this webinar is aiming to share our insights and experience. And we have, again, 4 fantastic speakers that will, I hope, challenge your thinking and challenge your mind. Sorelia, Laura, Rosa, and Ruben, welcome to the webinar. And you will present your work, and of course we are open to all the questions from the audience. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We can follow your questions and we will address them after the presentations, or we might also immediately respond to your question if we think it's an easy question to answer and you can just have an answer. So I suggest to start with the first speaker, Sorelia Segou. She is a Harvard Graduate School of Design LEAP Fellow. And until I think a couple of months ago, she was the Chief Heat Officer in Monterrey, which I think is a very exciting position, especially because it can get very hot here. So it's a very interesting position. She is also teaching at Tecnológico de Monterrey in a Masters of Urban Design and Architecture, and has her own office called El Cielo, in which she is working on a combination, I think, of research and practice when it comes to sustainable urban environments. So, Sorelia, if you want to share your screen and guide us to your presentation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rob, for the invitation. Can you hear me well? Okay, great. Thank you. Well, yes, as Rob was saying, I was Chief Heat Officer for the City of Monterrey until a couple of months ago, and I was in that job for a year. So I had a great opportunity to learn and understand the difficulties that cities are having now regarding the heat. And so for today, what I would like to share, let me see if I can, oh yes. I'm going to talk about a little bit about Monterrey because I don't know if everybody knows about Monterrey, so it's going to be brief information about it, and then some information about what is happening in the city and in the world about extreme heat. A little bit about my role as Chief Heat Officer, and then I'm going to present 4 projects. I hope that I will have the time to show you 4 projects that I will be collaborating with. This is from the academia, 2 from the UNAM. So they were very interested in Monterey and extreme heat, and in the Office of Extreme Heat, and also 2 projects from Rhode Island School of Design from Advanced Studio, just to show different possibilities to engage in this difficult problem that we are facing in cities. So Monterrey, this is Mexico, and Monterrey is the capital of Nuevo León, which is this state in the northeast. Is very close to the States, to the United States. So it has a very beautiful mountains, but it's been growing as a car-oriented city. So it is an industrial city. So you can see here the work of the cement or other materials for construction that happen to damage the mountains. It's a progressive city, and it's a metropolitan area. So because it's the capital, so this is the metropolitan area, and Monterrey is only this piece, but it's the largest municipality in the metropolitan area. The metropolitan area has about 5 million people, and Monterrey itself is 1,142,000 people. And just to start talking about the effects of heat, in Mexico and in Nuevo León, about 50% of the population are women and 50% are men. Less than half of working age women participate in labor market, and almost 60% of women who work do so in informal jobs, which in the majority of the people means that they work outdoors. They have a job outdoors. So they are exposed to extreme heat, and they are one of the vulnerable groups when we talk about extreme heat. This is an area, the north area of Monterrey, and just to show you how gray it is, the majority of the green areas are the mountains, and within the city is less than 7% of the surface. Monterrey is the first Mexican city to declare a climate emergency. That's why they were looking into open a extreme heat office. And it's part of the city Race to Zero. So they are generating engagement and trying to figure out how the city could be transformed into a green city and less warm. These are some facts just to share about the problem of extreme heat and how people are going to be exposed. I mean, they are people already exposed, but how in the future is going to be exposed. We are already experiencing an increase, I think in here, yeah. This past July, it was already the warmest week ever recorded in the world. And so here are some comments that the temperature in the oceans, the temperature in we face already a lot of wildfires. We were aware about Canada, but California and other countries. And this is a map of how it was just this past June in the country. So it's not just Monterrey, which is already hot, but it's the whole country. The pink color, it's about 30 degrees Celsius. The red one is about 35, and the gray one is about 40 degrees Celsius. 90% of the population of Nuevo León lives in the metropolitan area, and they are already, because of that, they are exposed to the extreme heat effects. This past June, we reached 44.8 degrees Celsius, which is what the highest recorded. And we experience a lot of deaths because of the extreme heat. So Nuevo León is one of the most affected by heat waves. And we also experienced in 2022 a water crisis. We have a very terrible drought. So these exacerbate, I mean, we have the extreme heat, the drought, and also bad air quality. So we have all the ingredients to have a very bad environment in the city. So after we have this major drought, we also had violent floods. So this is a contradictory situation in Monterrey because we have this extreme heat, but we have also this drought. And then when we have water, what the infrastructure of Monterrey does is trying to just get rid of the water as soon as possible. So this generates another problem, as you may know, and we can talk about it in the next project. I mean, when I talk about the projects. So it was this in the news, like if Monterrey reached the day zero, and we are experiencing a drought, but not as terrible as last year. And that's why I was part of this. The Archrock is a Adrian Arch Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center, which is focusing on resiliency for people and focusing on the health of people. One of their program is the Chief Heat Officer, and why they are focusing on heat is because they are the heat is the extreme heat is one of the phenomenon of the climate change that could be preventable but cause the majority of the deaths, and the extreme heat is a silent killer. So we are focusing on extreme heat. And one of the major challenges is to generate awareness about the issue, but also work with community and other stakeholders to try to improve the conditions of the city, and also redesign the city as part of the work that we have to do as chief heat officers. I'm going to go in a little faster. So I just want to say that after this work, what I've been learning and understanding is that we really need to have a systemic vision of the city. We cannot keep working in different areas not connected, and we need to work in the renaturalization of the cities, and from many different scale projects and from many different professions also. We need all the help into turning cities into a better space to live. This is from a thesis from one of my former students. I just want to say that I was invited by Ruben, who is here, and he's going to talk about this project, Ruben and Alejandro Echeverry. And we taught last spring in the masters, and this is one of these students took the topic into his thesis for the end of the master, and he developed some information. I just want to show here how hot gets the city. I'm not going to go into details because I don't have the time, and maybe it's difficult to see here, but there are some areas already that reach 70 degrees Celsius because of the conditions of the morphology of the city. So we are talking about 30 degrees or 40 degrees, but we know that people are experiencing already higher temperatures in the city. I'm sorry. Yes. So this is one project from UNAM. The professors are Elena Tudela, Daniel Dao, Adriana Lira, Luis Zambrano, Armando Hashimoto, and the students Valentina, Mariano, Cesar, Andino. And they call it Amortiguador Ribereño, which is the idea of regenerate a river in the city. So when we talk about, I mean, all this information, general information that I gave about Monterrey, we think that the city is kind of dry, and it is. But what we don't is not that evident is that we have in the city a really great network a really great hydrological system in the city, but it's mainly covered and a lot of it is abandoned also. So one of the teams took this job about regenerating the river and understanding how the river could be the articulator for recuperate social cohesion within the community, but also to improve the conditions of the people along the river. And to return the idea of the river to the city, we have here, I mean, I'm just going to show some concepts. That is what they have, like the stream and biodiversity restoration. Oops. Transformation of river flow through the introduction of wetlands. So how the restoration of the river can help in restoring the whole territory, beginning with the river and then kind of like contaminating the rest of the territory. Connecting parks and network, integral mobility connection. And this is the idea of the plan, how we can connect not just the river, but the connection with the mountain, that is the Cerro de la Silla, that is very close by. And then how this actual condition can change into something really as a tool to revitalize the whole city, not just the river. And some images. And how this could be a system of water connection and green lands for the city. This is another one that is also about the city, the river, but this is the Rio Santa Catarina, which is a river that crosses the city Monterrey, like in two parts, and disconnect the two parts. There's two. Well, this is from UNAM. I'm not going to read it because I won't have the time. But the idea in this case is to connect, to create an ecological corridor from a mountain, from downtown all the way to one of the small mountains that we have in the city, connecting through the river. And this is the Loma Larga mountain, and this is downtown. So the idea is to start creating connection and kind of like suing the division that the river and these two highways create in the city. This is just to show that this is the river right now, and the blue is the original river. So that's why also we have floodings in the city, because we are changing the way the original river goes. And this is the beginning point about connecting a park and then creating these green corridors and connecting into the mountain, and then creating a system for that. So the idea is also how we can create the system. So here are small, but a lot of these green corridors. And this is one of the original, the first one to connect through a bridge, and then also working on the regeneration of the river itself. So this is the river, the Santa Catarina River, and this is the idea of the green corridor and connecting through a park. And this idea that the river doesn't need to be, I mean, the park doesn't need to follow kind of like a straight line, but to start kind of like getting into the city and transforming already what is along this park, and how the people can use that park. And this is the idea of the bridge and the connecting with the green, with the mountain. And then another project from RISD, from Professor Armando Hashimoto, and this is healing the Topo Chico Canal, which is a small river in another area of the city. This is Lisa, Alaya, and Samuel's project. And they were focusing on, this is the Topo Chico River, this is the Santa Catarina River that I just talked about. La Silla is kind of like around here. And this is the Cerro Topo Chico, and this is the Topo Chico River or stream. Oops. This is the purple is the water, the hydrological system in Monterey, in that area. Wait, sorry that I could not. I think that I messed up when I zoom in. Yes. Sorry. Yes. And this is the actual canal, which is already, oops. Yes. These are the actual conditions of the canal. This is informal housing along the canal, invading the space for protection from flooding. And the idea is to start expanding the area of the canal so they can create also wetlands and relocate some of the people who are living there into a better land. So they are creating like these parks and wetlands along the river with some tools that they are developing. It's not that clear, but some parks, some solar energy, and the building of the wetlands, and some other. I'm not going to stop here, but this is an idea for housing with productive housing, with also water harvesting system, and how the pink is these buildings that they proposing where the people are going to be relocated, and then how they can open up some space because it's not safe for the people to live there. And this is their master plan. And I think I have a little bit of time. I'm already. So these are some drawings on how to use those spaces, and also how to use the canal to redevelop into a river, a healthy river with social activities and connectivity. And just the last one that I want to show very quick is about, so this is the before and the after of the proposal. And the last one is just redirecting urban growth. I'm going to go very fast. It's also at RISD, and Anthony and Soleil, they were working on how this is the regulation for the state, and these are the mountains, and these are parks around the mountains. And of course, housing and construction are getting into these green lands. So this is the image of the site, and how we can think about trying to densify certain areas and free some others in order to get, this is the actual condition, and this is the idea of proposing densification and liberating land for water management, but also for green infrastructure and blue infrastructure. And this is the image of this idea. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Aurelia. And I think it's amazing work by you and your students and your fellow professors that you have undertaken. And very interesting that I started realizing when I was talking that there is a very strong relationship between heat and water. And we may think about the absence of water, but you showed in several of your projects that it's very important to reintroduce and give more space to water systems and renature the city. So I think it's amazing work, and I can see some of the comments already in the chat that people are very keen to learn more about your project as well. So thank you so much. We move on to our next speaker, Laura Klerenkoper. Try that last name when you're not Dutch, I would say. And I think, Laura, we met more than 10 years ago for the first time, and I remember it was in Sao Paulo and it was very hot. So maybe that also ignited your interest in dealing with climate in the city. Laura is at the moment, she's working at the University of Applied Sciences in Amsterdam, part of the, I think, the water research group, if I call it well, and specialized in climate adaptation and design. She's an urban designer originally from the TU Delft. I did a PhD there. So Laura, the floor is yours, and tell us more about your work.
Yes, thank you. Let me first select the screen I want to share. Do you see my screen now?
Yes, you can.
But I don't see it myself. Maybe I should.
Maybe start the presentation.
Can I do it like this?
Yes, we
Okay.
can see it. If you see it yourself, and then we can. Please start.
Yeah. So thank you for your introduction. Yes, I work at the University of Applied Science. So we are really doing practical research with most of the time with municipalities. And together with them, we try to cope with their problems and their questions. And I want to tell you about what we do, and also give you some of our most recent or most important results about specifically heat. I don't think I need to tell you this anymore, because I think Soraya already gave you, and also Rob, an important or a good overview of what's happening. So it's getting really warm, and the extremes are repeating and getting more extreme around the world. Also in Europe, we have even last month it was really heavy in France, and before that in Spain and Italy. So it's popping up a lot of times, even in one summer. And then we get this kind of warnings in the Netherlands. There's a record heat expected, stay indoors, because outside it's getting uncomfortable and even dangerous. We work in 3 levels of adaptation for heat: the urban area, the building, and the people in the city. And today I'm really going to focus on the urban area. So what can we do outside in the urban space? What is very important to mention before I start is that in the Netherlands we have this Delta program, we call it, and that's a program that really focuses on climate resilient planning for the municipalities, and they need to incorporate urban heat in all of their plans from 2020. And when this rule was starting, there was not a real the knowledge on how to design or to make a city climate proof was not there yet. So there was this question, what is heat resilient planning actually? So they had to do something with it, but there was no rule or norm written yet how to do this. So we were asked by many municipalities what are effective guidelines to implement, and what can we do that is really helping. Well, then we started with a heat resilient city project, and first part was what is actually the problem in our cities, and we came up with a mind map that's indicating all the problems occurring when there was extreme heat. What are the risks for water, for infrastructure, health-related issues? You can. We also have a version in English which you can download with this link. And then there's explained more about each problem, what's occurring and what needs to be done. Then what are the effective measures? Well, that's something that we did research on through literature, we did measurements, we did surveys in cities, and we came up with a few tables, 3 tables, one about green measures, one about water, and one about gray, so more the technical measures you can take, and the climate effect you can achieve. So how many degrees does this actually influence the public space, outdoor public space? Also something you can look up. And we did, for example, also if we talk about the measurements at specific trees, we wanted to know if we can say this tree is better than the other one. How do we need to plant trees that are really effective? So we went out and measured a lot of them during a few days continuously. And well, we thought maybe we can point out species that cool more than others. But we came, it was more apparent that it's not about the species specifically, but more about the crown density was the most important parameter of a tree to cool. So the more dense a tree crown is, the larger the cooling effect. And it's not about the crown width, it's not about the crown or the tree height or the age, but so this density of a crown is more important. And of course, this is again influenced by is this tree healthy? What's the growing condition? Does it have enough water? So there are many other things that influence this crown density, of course, but it's not really related to tree species. And then if we go to what are the effective guidelines, we thought, we also discussed a lot with the municipalities. What is something that you can use? There are already fact sheets with this measure is going to give you this effect, and but they say we are now steering at we don't want the urban heat island effect to exceed to a certain level, or we don't steering at degrees or thresholds was really difficult for them because they couldn't really measure or know. Then they had to, for example, if there's a new city development plan, they need to be able to tell what's the effect of this measure, and they needed to simulate, for example, the results, and that was too expensive. So they said we can't do this for all of the plans. So how do we know if a plan is good enough or is heating up the city even more? So we had to think of something that's not really focusing on this temperature extremes. And our 3 guidelines that we think we can help that we thought the municipalities were able to deal with are these 3. That's distance to cool spots. So provide a cool spot so citizens have a place to go. Increase the percentage of shade on walking areas, and increase the percentage of green per neighborhood typology. And these 3 guidelines are different in goal, because there's a goal of decreasing the comfort temperature, the temperature that you perceive. That's a really local effect you're going to have. And the other one is the air temperature. That's a citywide effect. So the distance to cool spots and shading on walking areas has an effect on local, very locally. So where you put the measure, that's the place where you have the effect. But decreasing air temperature, that's influenced by the amount of green you have, is influencing on a larger scale. So you can't say place a tree here and the air temperature is locally decreased by this, because it's really the more green you add, the lower you can get the air temperature, but it's not always on the same spot, and it's the effect is more broad. So then you are talking about a city wide effect. I want to zoom in on the distance to cool spaces for now. We went on with this concept because we heard from many municipalities this is something that we want to go on with, yeah, to try to achieve, and they mostly use 300 meters of a green spot, yeah, for the cities in the Netherlands. But yeah, that's something that you can per city, or yeah, on what you think is a good distance, for also maybe the kind of people that live there. If there are more elderly people, distance should be shorter. If the age is younger, the distance might be longer. Here's a picture of Amsterdam, and you see the red areas. They have where there you need to walk more than 500 meters to reach a cool place, and then you, in the green, you have this 300 meter achieved. And then, of course, the next question is, what is a cool spot? Where, when do you think it should be counted? Therefore, we chose 200 square meters, because then you have yeah, enough body to create a cooler temperature. So essentially, that's 200 square meters, but to have a comfortable cool spot, not only cool but also comfortable, it should also have sun, because you need this space not to be used only during these hot extremes, but also during the rest of the year. And then having sun, especially in the Netherlands, is very important for people to, well, to use this kind of locations. It should be attractive for different groups of people, and have seatings, enough benches. And well, there are other things that would yeah, motivate people or to go there. And yeah, we asked many people during interviews on these cool spaces, but also out of these cool spaces, to know what people miss, why they don't go there. And many people said, well, we need it needs to be clean, or you need to have another facility actually to use it, like a playground for my children, or a place to have a drink. It's like an extra. Yeah, so in the whole over the whole, cool spots improve also the livability of a city throughout the year, not only during the hot periods. Then we come to greening of the cities, that for climate adaptation is not only having this effect, so you have this capability of coping with climate, but also improving cities as a whole to make them more beautiful, more attractive, and combine with mobility, diversity, and the energy transition. We think it's very important to combine these two always when you are looking at climate adaptation measures, that you choose, also thinking of the other aims we need to achieve in cities. Well, cities have a high amount of pavement, and here you see an Amsterdam example. 2018, it looked like this, and if you can green these kind of streets, yeah, you can improve livability a lot. I think that's a really nice example. And if we talk about biodiversity, here you see the decline in species, and the very large importance that we have in making an effort of keeping this biodiversity as high as possible, and also try to do this in the urban areas, since more and more of our globe is consisting of urban areas. So we are doing research on blue-green roofs as well. And blue-green roofs are important to catch water, to keep water. It helps in indoor temperatures and also outdoor, but also very important for the biodiversity, depending on what kind of vegetation and substrate layers you can choose. Then one example from a research where we use different typologies, because we think that each urban typology demands for another approach, and other solutions will fit. So it's important also for municipalities to know what can I do in which kind of situation. And here an example of typical neighborhood typology. We have the urban city block. This is these streets are very paved. There are mature trees, so in these streets are from 1900. But for water, it's really difficult here. And sometimes also, if there are not so many trees, it's difficult to get enough shade and cooling. And we developed for each urban typology a green design, and we try to give the temperature that you could reach with this green design, but especially also try to show what's possible in this kind of street. And this is so the urban city block, where you can combine green with water catchment, like in these green infiltration sort of green gutters, you can call them in English maybe. But they're also growing full with vegetation, perennials, but also trees even. And then the last thing I want to stress and to tell, that we developed a nighttime heat stress map, because we think because the measures I showed before were all for during the daytime, but also nighttime heat is a problem, and to cope with heat, you need to be able to recover from the daily heat stress. And at night in the Netherlands, it's often not cooling down. And how can we improve this nighttime cooling down in cities? And there's a lack of knowledge on this right now. So we developed a map, but it's really, really rough, and we don't know what are the mechanisms that would improve this or change this nighttime heat. So we are starting a project now to investigate this more, do night measurements and more research into this. And I would also be very happy to know if others who are listening, or my colleague presenters have more knowledge about this, or are also researching this aspect. Well, and if you have any questions, I would be very happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Laura, and a very interesting research you presented, especially the way you come from, the standards and the tables and understanding the facts and figures to concrete examples that you can apply in the city. And I think this is really important to not only talk about it in an abstract way, but also to make it happen in reality. And the last thing that you showed, I think that's really interesting, because we tend to kind of generalize and think about the hottest temperature during the day, but forget about the stress that we all experience during the night, which is maybe even more stressful. So that may be an open research question that is asking for more investigation and collaboration. And perhaps we can link Monterrey with Amsterdam in investigating this. I don't know. Maybe that's a good idea for next month or years. So thank you very much for your presentation, and I'm sure there will be some more questions after all presenters have presented. We move on to our next speaker, which is Rosa de Wolf. She is currently working at the University of Delft, the University of Technology in Delft, and about to start her PhD. So that's very exciting. I think this journey she's entering. She did a very interesting research in her master's about arid cities, mainly focusing on the EcoCity program in Morocco. So that is something special. I don't know why Dutch people have a kind of thing that they want to investigate heat. Maybe because it's so cold in the Netherlands, relatively, I don't know. But it is indeed very interesting. So Rosa, thank you for being here, and please start your presentation.
Thank you, Rob, for the introduction. And thanks everyone for being here. Also Surela and Laura for your very inspiring presentations. So as Rob already mentioned, my name is Rosa de Wolf and I live in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Today it has been 20 degrees Celsius outside, quite comfortable, but as Surela and Laura already mentioned, worldwide we've faced very heavy rainfall. We've faced periods of droughts and extreme temperatures during this last summer. And this was also the case in Morocco. So in Morocco, temperatures exceeded 50 degrees Celsius in several cities. And for me personally, I wouldn't be able to function properly at all in 50 degrees Celsius. But as the others mentioned already as well, I'm afraid that extreme events like these will be happening more and more often. And the Moroccan government actually has this set up this national scale program to counteract events like these from happening by creating more sustainable cities and more resilient cities. And this program is called the EcoCity Morocco program. So the EcoCity Morocco program is an initiative by the state-led developer El Mram, and they partnered with the EcoCity builders. So for the ones of you that are not familiar with the term EcoCity, the EcoCity builders formulated the definition that an EcoCity is an ecologically healthy city. And the long version is that an EcoCity is a human settlement modeled on the self-sustaining resilient structure and function of natural ecosystems. So for us as urban designers to advance on this transformative framework of an EcoCity, redesign in most cases is needed. Within Morocco, within the EcoCity Morocco program, 7 cities are participating across the country. And as you might know, within Morocco, there are several different climates. This photograph on the left is taken in Ibn Battuta, which is a satellite city to Tanger in the north of Morocco. It's located near the ocean and near natural landscape. It has a quite mild climate, whilst Tamansourt, the city you see here on the right, is located more to the south. It's a satellite city to Marrakesh, and it's located near a desert landscape. It's a more arid climate. So therefore, all those eco-cities in Morocco are facing their own challenges in this transition. So the 7 eco-cities are all part of the Moroccan Ville Nouvelle strategy, where the national government aims to support population and economic growth, as well as urbanization, by founding 19 new towns. So Ibn Battuta, the city you just saw on the left, is located over here. It's number 3. And Tamansourt is located over here near Marrakesh. It's number 1. So as we're talking about urban heat today, well, we already also discussed the urban heat island effect, which is the phenomenon where the temperatures within the city are higher than within the natural landscape surrounding the city. And this diagram by Pijpers S in 2015 shows the causes of this urban heat island effect. And as you can clearly see, the design of the built environment affects these temperatures. So we have the design of the built volumes, the activities within the city, the building materials, but also the amount of vegetation within cities. But with this EcoCity Morocco project, we're working with new towns, so we kind of have a semi-clean sheet to start with, because the design is still a bit flexible. None of the cities are fully developed yet. So we have a pretty clean sheet. When we zoom out to the African continent, we have this map made by Keaton in 2020 that shows the climate change threats. And over here, the red pinkish dots show the Moroccan new towns. And as you can see, all those new towns face the risk of desertification due to climate change. So the question for this EcoCity project is, how can we counteract this effect due to climate change by creating those eco-cities? So the city I would like to zoom in on is the city of Tamansoort. Tamansoort is the first new town eco-city founded under the Ville Nouvelle strategy. It's founded in 2004, and there are now approximately 60,000 people living there. They have a target population with over 300,000 people, so it's not nearly finished yet. It was the city, the subject of my graduation project at Delft University of Technology, as Rob already mentioned. And after my graduation, the EcoCity builders invited me on the validation panel for this program. So therefore, I visited Tamansoort 2 times. First time in May 2022 and the second time in May 2023. And the first time I've been there, I brought with me this very low profile thermostat. And me and my partner measured the temperature on the exact same time, a very hot moment of the day, on the exact same height, about 1.50 meters. And one of us stood on the street and one of us stood within the urban green. It was an extreme hot day because on the street, we measured a temperature of 47.4 degrees, whilst in the urban green, we measured 33.8 degrees. So within the city itself, we also see extreme differences in temperatures, and this shows in people behavior and how people use the city. So I think this photograph I took in Tamansoort region is quite iconic for this. You see 2 men grabbing onto this kind of fragile young citrus tree just to get the very little shade from this tree. But trees provide us with shade, but they do a lot more than just this. They also contribute a lot to the natural system. In my free spare time, I'm a volunteer for Africa Woodgrow. And with Africa Woodgrow, we aim for reforestation of the dry tropics in Kenya, over here. And we do this by empowering local communities. So we give trees to local farmers. These local farmers take care of the trees. And by this, they enhance local biodiversity. After 15 years, we now see monkeys coming back to the landscape. We improve water infiltration capacity of the soil, and we adjust the microclimates. And by this, the farmers are able to actually grow crops underneath those trees. So we transition this degraded, eroded landscape into a more forest landscape, actually an agroforest. So back to Tamansoort. Tamansoort, as I mentioned, was founded in 2004, actually to resolve urban congestion in Marrakesh. But Marrakesh wanted to expand, and eventually they wanted to expand into this agricultural belt that is surrounding Marrakesh. But agriculture is quite important to the Moroccan economy, and therefore they forbid Marrakesh to expand into this land. So they founded Tamansoort on the other side of the Tensift River to resolve urban congestion in Marrakesh, and they founded Tamansoort on a natural landscape that wasn't suitable for agriculture. This map shows the elevation of the Tensift Basin. The Tensift Basin is enclosed by the North Atlantic Ocean, the High Atlas Mountains, and the lower lying Jebel Mountains. And as you can see, Tamansoort is satellite to Marrakesh. There's the Tensift River in between both. And when we zoom into Tamansoort, we see that Tamansoort is located on the foot of the Jebel. It's located on a very slow slope, and it's enclosed by 2 wadis. and those wadis occasionally flood. But due to the effects of climate change, those floodings might occur more and more frequently in the future as well. So if we look at the satellite images from 1985 until now, we see that in 1985, these wadis that enclosed Amersfoort were actually clear green linear elements. And since the founding of Amersfoort, this green completely disappeared, along with human development, development of Amersfoort. So now we want to transition Amersfoort in this ecologically healthy city, but there's very little vegetation left here. So what I gained, the experience I gained while being on site is that local communities have a lot of knowledge on the local context, the local climate, and the local culture. And by including them into the development, in any sustainable urban development, I think these designs will be strengthened. So for my graduation project, I came up with the vision Regreen to Rewild into Amersfoort Ecocity 2040, where we start with active regreening of the landscape in order to create the conditions in which the natural system is able to rewild itself. And for the strategy, I wanted to do this by a process of co-creation. And therefore, I formulated a pattern language based on the idea of Christopher Alexander. I formulated the Urban Evergreen pattern language in order to develop this process in which all stakeholders could be included and could participate. And in the process of developing this language, I started by actually analyzing the design guidelines that were developed on the Moroccan new towns in 2010. And I noticed that none of them were focused on the biosphere, on vegetation, on water systems, whilst, according to the Stockholm Resilience Center, in this diagram showing the integrated sustainable development goals of the United Nations, that biosphere might actually be the foundation for a sustainable society and sustainable economy, and thus sustainable global sustainability. But in Amersfoort and in some other Moroccan towns, as the first designs of those cities were not focused on this biosphere at all, this foundation for sustainability was a bit unstable to begin with. And therefore, in that urban arid green pattern language, I focused a lot on this biosphere, on circularity and equality. So one of the examples of a more zoomed in design was the transition of those body beds into seasonal parks. And by this, we actually rethink a unbuilt buffer zone, because there was this buffer zone to protect the city from flash floods. And rethink it into this pleasant outdoor space that wasn't there in the city yet. The process that should be going on here is a process of rewilding. So we start with this image. It's a photograph I took back in 2022 of a dried up body bed with goats and sheep overgrazing the body bed, as there's a little bit more vegetation within the body bed than outside. But they are overgrazing the land, and therefore we have to control the grazing in the first phase by, for instance, planting very thorny bushes. And also by adding organic material, we can let the ground cover recover itself. By this, we improve the water infiltration capacity of the soil, and a shrub layer might emerge. Then in the last phase, we have this phase of rewilding, and as these body beds originally already were green elements, there might be enough seeds left in the seed bank in the soil. Otherwise, we should start with replanting those trees. So the patterns of the urban evergreen pattern language that are implied in this specific location are, for instance, the controlled grazing pattern, the native species, reducing flash floods, and improving quality of space. And the idea of this pattern language is that every pattern could be applied on a different context and different location, within this project or within another project, whilst the design output would never be identical. So for instance, with the native species pattern, this for Tamansoort resulted in a species catalog. So in every location of the city, we have a different set of species that green maintenance could use. For instance, in the urban environment, we might want more ornamental species, as well, the environment must also look nice. Then in the agroforest side, we want either edible species or species with more economic value. And in a park, we want to control erosion and focus on water infiltration. But we also want less maintenance because we don't want to maintain 6 kilometers of rewilded parks. So to conclude, with the EcoCity framework, we created one framework for the poly problem. We contribute to the reversal of desertification. We reduce the urban heat island effect, whilst we still address food and water insecurities in Morocco, and we allow and stimulate the population growth and urbanization. That's it. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation and this brief insight in the EcoCity Morocco project.
Thank you very much, Rosa. A very, very interesting project. I knew about it a little bit before, but you have showed me a lot of extra and more things. So I hope everyone enjoyed it as well. And one of the things that strikes me is that you present a general strategy which can be applied in many different ways. So I assume it is available online, so other cities and other projects can easily use it and make use of it and the way of thinking. I really enjoyed that. Thanks so much.
It is available.
So it is available. Online? Great. So
yes, in the QDAF repository.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So if you type in Delft Rosa, and then we will find it. No problem. Yes. Thank you very much. So we have been from Monterey to Amsterdam to Morocco, and I assume Ruben will bring us back to Monterey at the end of this webinar. And if not, we will be surprised. But anyway, Ruben is our director of the Master of Architecture and Urban Design program at Tecnológico de Monterrey, and also has his own architecture and urban design firm called LS Lab. And it is always interesting to listen to him. And I don't know how he does it, but last year or last semester, he started a studio on heat, and it became very hot. And this year he is doing a studio on the Santa Catarina River, which is has his own problems. So he is always capable of finding the right topics that are very, very timely. So I don't know, I have to learn from you, Ruben, how you do it, but it's very interesting and very exciting projects and master programs that you do. So thank you for being here, and please show us and share your experiences and projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for the invitation. And thanks, Sureya, for the introduction to Monterrey, because I'm going to, as Rob mentioned, talk about Monterrey and that studio in which we work during this spring in the northern part of Monterrey. And thanks, Laura and Rosa, for the presentations. I've been taking a lot of notes because I see a lot of intersections in the situations that we are experiencing. Let me share my screen. So, and I hope, Rob, I'm not a bad omen for these urban situations in which we start a studio about a certain topic and then things devolve into something that it's very urgent for our urban experiences. But as Rob mentioned, we work in this studio, which we name it Everyday Urban Utopias. And the word utopia was really interesting for us, not as an imposition of a vision or not as a way into telling municipalities or people how to act or how to behave or how to design the city, but more as triggers for starting a conversation of a very important topic that we are experiencing. And everything was focused on climate adaptation. This was a very robust studio. in which we taught, I taught alongside Alejandro Echeverri, which was one of the speakers in I think the first episode, Rob, of these urban dialogues, and also with Sureya. And we were also working alongside with UNAM professors and students. They were able to visit Monterrey and work together and have a sort of pecha kucha experience in which we shared knowledge and shared challenges for the projects that we were working. And something that is really interesting about our master's program is that all of our students come from different backgrounds. So we allow them to explore their own professional paths through these themes, through these topics, through these methodologies. So we divided roughly their interests in 3 categories. One set of students were working on water systems and hydrological systems. Another set of 2 teams, they were working on the built environment. And another team, they were focusing mostly on open systems, primarily in ecological patterns and ecological processes. So as Sureya mentioned, there's an urgency in the extreme heat situation that we're living in Monterrey. Half of the heat stroke deaths accounted in our country are linked to Nuevo León, to our state. And even some of the media are linking this phenomena to a similar phenomena with COVID deaths. So it's something that we were not prepared. And even our studio happened before the summer heat wave. So we were not prepared with the mapping and with all of the projects that we were proposing for the outcome that we are experiencing. And you can see here that the main spot for these tragic events, for these heat stroke deaths, it's located in our state, especially in Monterrey, in the municipality of Monterrey. So with that background, we asked the students to analyze this area of Monterrey, which is limited roughly by 2 mountain systems that Sureya explained, which is El Cerro de las Mitras and Topo Chico, the Topo Chico Cerro. And also it's limited by 2 very important hydrological systems, which is the Rio Pesquería on the north and the Rio Santa Catarina on the south. And this area is the one in the city that is affected the most by extreme heat. And we wanted to embed a methodology in which the most important part of the studio will be understanding the problem. And especially because we found out that we don't have enough data and maps to understand and explain what is happening with urban heat in Monterrey. So mostly the heavy lifting of the studio was doing the mapping, understanding the overlapping of the systems, why we have this current situation. And from there, we derived certain visions and certain city experiences that we suggest might happen if we take into account the relationship of these systems. So we visited some of the public spaces in this area that we were studying with our tech students and UNAM students. It was oddly cold during that time that we visited these spaces. But nevertheless, we started to measure, for example, the heat that certain materials release to the environment. And we found out that the materials that we are locating, for example, for children's spaces or for youth spaces are the ones that are the hottest. For example, synthetic turf is the hottest material that we can find in our parks, or plastic that is used in playgrounds. So this was really interesting to start to map these materials, and actually one of the groups focused their research and their projects in how can we rethink materials in housing components of our city. And we started the conversation with these prompts to not just map the outcome of heat, but also understand how can we map other elements that could help us to mitigate this situation that we're experiencing. So what is the role of vegetation, of water, as Rob mentioned? What is also how our lifestyle and the way we occupy the land, it's also creating a certain effect on temperature. And to also land in issues of inequality, on issues of social vulnerability. So we started, as I mentioned, connecting certain systems. All of the work that you're going to be seeing now is produced by our students. Alejandro, Sureya, and I, we were just functioning more as guides, and also Rob was part of our advisors. So first, we started to understand that Monterrey is part of a larger watershed and basin system that is not only our rivers, but it's where the rivers lead to and where they come from. And that was a very important hint to further projects that I'm going to show. And also, there was a strange paradox in which where we have water, it's also the most vulnerable places for flooding, but also during drought seasons are the most hot spots. So how can we reverse that condition in which we could have water there to mitigate those situations? And as you can see, we were starting also to understand that there's a correlation with the built environment and non-permeable surfaces and the rise in temperatures in the area. But we wanted to go further and use the heat map, the temperature heat map as a canvas to overlay different systems on top of it. So we started to understand, like in this diagram by Sofia, David, and Paulina, that as we move in a chronological timeline in Monterrey, we started to create a city model in which there's less density, so it starts to create a more horizontal and expansive city. And as we grow our urban footprint, temperature starts to rise. And something really interesting that Sofia, David, and Paulina found out is that also heat is related to certain urban programs, and we will see in further diagrams. Also, Letty, Nurit, and Brandon, they were starting to understand. We tend to think Monterrey as a city that is not very biodiverse, but they started to find that it's quite rich in biodiversity. The only challenge that we have is that our built environment is cutting out the ecological corridors that we have in our city. So their project started to see how to reconnect those ecological corridors and how to embed it in our daily lifestyle. Also, something that was really interesting is to see how there's a sectional quality in temperature, how our higher grounds and our mountains are cooler than our plateaus or our valleys. So that also starts to talk about a certain let's say, design toolkit on how nature, altitude, biodiversity, water are certain elements that we can use to address this extreme heat issue. Also, something that was quite striking is that extreme heat is also related to marginal communities and vulnerable communities in terms of economic income. And also access to education. So these areas that have less public space, that have less walkable sidewalks, that have less vegetations, and that have the lower incomes in our city are the ones that are more affected with extreme heat. And also, we started to correlate the indexes of marginalization with extreme heat and start to understand that even though we have certain public spaces, the quality of those spaces are not ideal to mitigate and to, as Laura was mentioned, to have nice access and close access to cooling spots. And also something related to our visit when we were measuring the radiance of materials, Javier, Alejandro, and Eduardo started to correlate how certain materials in housing have very extreme effects on generating more heat, catching heat during the day and releasing heat during the night. And as I mentioned, urban form is directly correlated to the rising temperature. For example, these extreme hotspots are related to certain programs such as big block shopping malls and big block supermarkets, in which they have large surfaces of impermeable parking lots, and they have these huge architecture features that they don't allow water infiltration, water catchment, and they also generate a lot of heat because they are air conditioned mechanically. So they also release a lot of heat into the atmosphere. And there's also a problem with gated communities, because gated communities tend to neglect their natural environment and their natural resources that happen around them, and they have little space for public space. So these studies start to correlate how urban form and the way we use the city, the way we experience the city, has a direct relationship of extreme heat. And also something that was really interesting, as Rob mentioned, is how water plays a fundamental role in cooling our cities. So Saul, Elsa, and Adrian found out that the places that are more vulnerable to flood are the ones that are paradoxically more vulnerable to extreme heat. So that started to gives us a hint on how to create a healthy relationship with seasonal changes throughout the year. How can we use water during our rain seasons, catch it, maintain it, and then later release humidity to cool down these areas. So with this overlapping of mapping exercises, which was also quite challenging because there's not enough data and information about urban heat, we started to generate certain visions in which we can start to generate a better relationship between these overlapping systems. So for example, Letty, Nurita, and Brandon started to find out that in this valley, in this northern Monterrey Valley, because of the urban processes, all of the ecological corridors were cut out. So there were certain species that used to migrate from Cerro del Topo Chico to Cerro de las Mitrias back and forth. And that creates a phenomenon that it's called sky islands. So their project was trying to reconnect these ecological corridors through bioengineering solutions, through regenerative design, to create these green corridors that were not only suited for non-human species, but also to create a better relationship, both social but also cultural, with water. Because in Monterrey, we have this strange phenomenon in which our city always gives the back to our natural resources or to our water resources. So they were trying to create a better imaginarium, a better relationship with these water systems. Same with Caro and Ilse, in which they were trying to create a set of green corridors, but in the other direction, connecting north and south and catching all of the water flows from Cerro del Topo Chico and integrating them into green corridors, both full of trees, but also full of different modes of modality of mobility. Same with that conclusion that Saul, Elsa, and Adrian arrived with, this overlapping of flooding and heat. They started to imagine what happens if instead of flooding, we could control water, we could retain water, and we can create cooling spots within the natural ecosystems that are already in place. So how to catch water from the mountains, how to catch water and also clean water from the larger basins and watershed ecosystems, and generate a master plan that creates a more sustainable neighborhood for communities. And Sofia, David, and Paulina, they were thinking, what if we repurpose gated communities, and what if we repurpose the negative space of our city, the space that is not quote unquote built, and instead of thinking about non-permeable surfaces in those negative spaces, how can we start to catch water, infiltrate water, generate green canopies, and change that temperature through very simple but very necessary solutions. So, for example, they were thinking how to repurpose these negative spaces, which typically are our streets and our sidewalks, and reconnect them, de-pave the rivers, generate more green corridors, open the gated communities to these parks, and instead of thinking parks with synthetic materials, think parks about natural materials, dirt, that creates and allows water to permeate and cool down the environment, and how to rethink our relationship with infrastructure. Something that was really striking through one of the reviews is how engineers tend to get the water out of the city. And Rob was telling us, how about we keep the water inside the city? How we start to rethink our engineering mindset, and instead of just thinking of getting rid of the water, we start to think of how to catch, use it, and have a better relationship with water, in which water helps not only as a generator of humidity that could cool down our environments, but also could create a social network of public space, a social network of better relationships between neighborhoods, and also can start to be a link between the different programs that currently have our city a little bit segregated. So we wanted to imagine a city that is not only for working and for sleeping, but a city that is for enjoying it, a city that is for all of the different kinds of biodiversity, a city that is connected with their natural processes, instead of cutting those natural processes to embed ourselves as humans in those flows, water flows, ecological flows, seasonal flows, and to see heat not as a process that could be detrimental to human flourishing, but as a process that could be embedded into the other systems that are present in Monterrey, and to recognize those systems. And lastly, we wanted to generate these conversations on how can we relate better with those natural processes, with those ecological systems that are not only water for water's sake or trees for trees' sake, but that they could also be social catalysts, that they could be elements to bring people together and to have a different imagination of the city, that the city is not only built progress and industrial progress, but also there's a certain ecological progress that could benefit its inhabitants. And for us, the next steps of this studio, we're prepping a publication, and we're going to add the results of other research and other projects from our Tech Cities initiative. We have a robust cities initiative that focuses not only on extreme heat, but also in other areas such as caring cities, such as mobility. And also we want on the long road to start to implement some of these ideas so we can measure, monitor, and start to understand how these solutions could mitigate the situation that we currently live in. Thank you for hearing this about these projects, these beautiful student projects, and thanks, Rob, once again for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Ruben, and you know, very interesting to see the projects of the students that have been working in the studio last semester. And one of the things that I found very interesting in your talk is that the connection of natural and social systems. if people do not embrace their environment, we will never create a better situation than we have now. If people start to become isolated from their urban environment, they will never appreciate water, nature, a cooler environment directly. So I think that is also one of the main learnings of your talk. Thank you so much. We have a little bit time for a couple of questions that have been put in the chat by different people, and maybe we cannot do every question, but to start with the first one that I saw coming across, it was asked to Soraya, and it was about how do you involve, and it relates back to what Ruben is actually mentioning in his talk. How do you relate back to the community? Can the community be involved in the planning and designing process, and how could you do this? So Soraya, if you have some ideas about this, probably you have.
So, well, the projects that I show, they were academic exercises, but we've been during our different stages in our professional practice, we've been always trying to create a participatory process in terms of the community in any project that it was more city-based, like a strategy for the Tacubaya area, where we already I think that working with the community is not so common practice in Mexico. I mean, it is, because we have by law, we need to kind of like socialize projects, programs, particularly in government. But I think that we really need to go deeper into that participation and really understand and incorporate the knowledge that the community have about the site, the way they live, their culture. And this is really important in each community. So I think that the challenge is how, through what kind of mechanisms or tools we can incorporate the community in the whole process, from the beginning all the way through the end. And because if we are professionals or if we are in the government, we work sometime in the community, but the community is the one that experience, and they are going to stay in that community, right? And we forget that. So I think that there are different tools that we can incorporate, and including technology, like the use of websites, of course, talking to the community, but also creating workshops and interviews and design processes with the community. So I think that we need, and part of why we have the cities that we have right now, I think, is because we are not incorporating the real needs of the community and their knowledge too. So I just want to say that when we are talking about extreme heat, sometimes we are rethinking about the way we used to build in the past and how wise the people were before us. So like in the case of Monterrey, if you go downtown, you can see the way people used to build, with smaller windows, thicker walls, with a patio integrated in the home. And we are pushing, in particular in terms of housing, into incorporating these already proved technologies that we have. So incorporating what people already knows is really important for the projects. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I think that there is not a recipe into how to work with the community.
No, I think that is right, and also the community probably doesn't exist as a defined group of people. Monterrey has 5.5 million people in the region, who is the community when you talk with the community. So that is a process in itself, and probably also an academic research in itself that we should further explore. How do you deal and how do you involve really a large group of people that is, and not only the few people that are interested by accident or by something else in the process. How is that in Morocco, Rosa? Did you have any type of relationships with the community themselves, or because you were talking about the culture and the culture that you need to influence the outcomes as well?
Yes, well, for instance, when I was in Tamansoort and I was walking those dried up body beds, we came across this shepherd that was letting his herd graze those wadi beds. And it was super logical that he was grazing those wadi beds because there was a little bit more ground cover for his herds to graze on. But if we can include these local communities, such as this shepherd, in the design process, and also explain to them why he shouldn't graze let his herd graze those wadi beds, he would probably be fine by letting the herd graze somewhere else if we provide him with a place to do that in the design. And I think by including all those different parties, the design also will become better, because then you won't have to put up a fence, because the herd wouldn't want the shepherd wouldn't want his herd to graze there anymore. So yeah, in that sense, I hope that the pattern language is a tool to start that conversation with all those different parties.
Yeah, I think that's really great, and that maybe links in also with another question that was asked about. Laura, you used the standards and the technology, and then translate it into models for urban design. How do you think about let's say the digital simulations of this? And related to this, if we have a pattern language for green arid areas, can we use that in a digital simulation sort of thing? And how far away are we then from the community, or are we getting closer to the community?
Okay, well, first question. We use digital tools in a 3D environment, like municipalities already use programs like Tigrun or Digital Twin, they call it. Then you have a virtual area where they can test their plants and what the effect is on water, on heat, on their how far they are with their own strategies. But still, it's really important. It's really hard to decide if they are doing enough. So is it green enough, or is it cool enough, or do we really want to achieve? Because we work with 1 in 100 years or 1 in 1,000 years event. Is this something that we need to invest on, or is it also wiser to accept this risk for the 1 in 1,000 years and try to make it that you can cope with certain events, even though the street is flooded, but we don't really mind that it's 1 in 100 years that way. So those choices are really still where municipalities talk about and need to decide on. But I think also the inhabitants are often now part of this process. So we have we have dialogues, on heat stress, also on water events, and then inhabitants can also say to the municipality, we really don't want our basements to flood, but if our street is underwater, it's not for us not such a problem, or we prefer the parking places to flood and not the street, or so and in this way they really have a say in what is going on, and municipalities have more a feeling that they are really working on what the inhabitants want, because also this participation process for municipalities is sometimes hard to really engage them and find ways to make a choice between, because what Rob also says, the one community doesn't exist. If you make one inhabitant happy, the other one's not. So, but if you can get them to agree on a plan and accept certain risk, and that's really something that's really nice to achieve. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lara. And I'm afraid we have to stop the dialogue here because we're running out of time. I have the feeling we can talk for another hour and discuss more of these topics more closely. I think it was a very exciting webinar we had together, and so some preliminary conclusions is that we need to rewild our cities because green and water is very good for mitigating heat. We need to use local culture, local communities to inform us about how to do it. And I think a final conclusion might be that thinking about heat in the city is just in an initial stage when it comes to urban planning and design. And we need to do much more about it. So we need to investigate maybe multiple projects and many other ways of thinking that can respond to this kind of this relatively new topic. I mean, all cultures dealt with heat for centuries, but after the Industrial Revolution, now we're being confronted with the real questions that we have not really answered in our urban context. So that is an invitation for continuation of the discussion and developing more research projects in architecture and urban design, but also with other disciplines, I think. So thank you so much, Soraya, Laura, Rosa, and Ruben. It was a very interesting Mexican-Dutch combination of talks and insights. So thank you very much. And for everyone who is watching, I can tell you that the next Urban Dialogue will be on 18th of October. And the topic of that dialogue will be biourbanism. So we are going abstract, I think. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I hope to see you all in the next webinar. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you for organizing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.